بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Hello and welcome to Islamic Civilization, this time session 17 that deals with the Caliphate of Uthman bin Affan. And so there's a lot to cover, so let's see what we have in terms of the objective. Objectives for this session: Caliphate of Uthman, who ruled from 644 to 656 AD. He met stiff opposition at election, reconquered rebellious territories of Byzantine and Persian empires, increased agriculture and commerce, and murdered by opposition groups. So there's a lot to cover, and let's see what we have next in this presentation. Contested election of Uthman, the third caliph in Islamic history, who ruled from 644 to 656 AD. Contested election of a caliph. Caliph Umar, who ruled from 634 to 644 AD, on his deathbed, he created a 6-member council to elect caliph, the next caliph after him. 2 members claimed right to caliphate, and these 2 members were out of the 6 members in the council to elect the caliph, and they staked out their own claims. And those 2 members were Uthman ibn Affan, who was 66 years old at that time, against Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was 46 years of age. So one you have an older gentleman and the other quite a young person. Both were Prophet Muhammad's sons-in-law. So Uthman ibn Affan had married 2 of the Prophet's daughters, one after another, and Ali had married one of his daughters, Fatima. So that's why they were both, in a way, they were sons-in-law of Muhammad. Uthman was elected as caliph eventually by the council, the election council, so to speak. Ali accepted Uthman's caliphate. But then what happened was, Caliph's Uthman election was acceptable to the contender Ali, but not to Ali's party. Uthman received Ali's active cooperation, and whenever he needed him, he would, ask him, and Ali would definitely deliver on his cooperation. Uthman's Umayyad clan, by the way, and Ali's Abbasid clan competed for political and dynastic power, and that would ruin a lot of, things and would create a lot of bloodshed. And so both were, by the way, rivals before Islam. So here I want to say something because this is going to stay with us for quite some time. The rivalry between Umayyads, a clan, a family, the Umayyads and the Abbasids, another clan. Remember, both were Quraysh. Both are Arabs, both are Quraysh, and both were from Mecca. And so they had immigrated along with the Prophet to Medina in 622 AD. So they stayed in Medina, but they kept their Quraysh, of course, ethnicity, so to speak, their tribal, leaderships, and both were rivals before Islam. They cooperated the most with one another in Islam, till they reached a point where they had to compete, just like they used to do. They competed against each other, and you would see a lot of bloodshed coming out of this problem, the tribal or clannish problem between the two clans, the Umayyads on the one hand and the Abbasid on the other hand. Although they did a lot, in their own way, each in its own sphere did a lot for the expansion of Islam, for the spread of Islam, for creating, Islamic civilization and all that. But we should know that they competed against each other, and that in that competition, you do have wars between the two of them. So let's see what else we have in this presentation. Caliph Uthman, who ruled, as I said, from 644 to 656 AD, he responded to the Byzantine and Persian imperial threats. A big problem, but he, responded with great, force and tact. He reoccupied the already conquered Byzantine and Persian territories. And what had happened, and this would happen again and again in the history of Islam, that the Muslims, they conquered a place that was once upon a time, so to speak, and not too long ago, by the way, a threat to Mecca and Medina. So they went and they removed that threat. But there were always people who would incite or excite the anti-Islamic forces in the region, and especially the two superpowers, the Byzantine Empire, the Christian Byzantine Empire, and the Zoroastrian Sassanid Empire in Persia. So they would excite people, incite people against the Islamic rule in the areas that the Muslim forces had conquered, and sometime it would work, sometime it won't. And so from about 644, after the death of the second Caliph, Umar, what you would see, the people rather seem to be like exhausted, to be fighting for the Greeks against the Persians and for the Persians against the Greeks. And so most of them seem to have decided that they would not do this type of a fighting either for the Greeks or for the Persians, and they would rather stay under the Islamic rule. To the extent that they could peacefully, they would stay under Islamic rule in peace and enjoy their life, their peace, and their property, and their business and trade and commerce and agriculture. But there would definitely come sometime either the Greeks, for example, in Egypt or in Syria, and similarly the Persians would come down to further south to Iraq and excite people against their Islamic rulers, and that would create problem in the region. So let's see what happened. So there, these Byzantine and Persian rulers, they became quite emboldened because the second Caliph Umar, very powerful man, he was assassinated, as I told you in the last session, by his Persian slave, Pharaohs. And so they believe that it must have been, that time had come for both for the Byzantine and the Persian rulers to take revenge and go after the Arabs or the Muslims at that time and take back the territories that they had lost to Caliph Umar. Both imperial forces, they tried their best to recover the lands they lost to Caliph Umar 10 years ago. And as I said, the subject people did not support their imperial forces against Islamic rule. I bring this point here, and it's very important because it solves a lot of our problems, especially the question, how was it possible for a couple of hundred people sometime, and maybe 1,000, sure, to conquer, such a huge big territory, landmass, from that eventually would stretch from Spain in the west to India in the east? How was that possible for these guys to get out of Mecca and Medina and bring entire Egypt, North Africa, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, northwestern part of India? how that could be possible. Even Turkey, that was under the direct rule of the Greeks, the Greek Byzantine Empire, and even eventually later on, threaten Constantinople, and they will take, Constantinople. And so that is just an amazing, phenomenal, spectacular spread of Islam and the Islamic rule. And so people think, all these Arabs, they had rockets at that time or something like that, or maybe tanks or F-16. That was not the case. What they had was, number one, the spirit of their faith, the belief that their faith was the right faith, and number two, that work in a way for the Arabs, the people of the previous two empires who had been fighting for more than 1,000 years. The people that were caught between the two empires did not want to fight anymore, because now they had another power, a third power, the Islamic power, the Arabs, Muslims, who could protect them from these two superpowers who brutalized them for 1,000 years. And you would see the big difference between the triangular type of a rule, Byzantine on the one hand and the Persian on the other hand, who really exploited people for centuries. And here come Muslims and get them free from that Greek, Byzantine, and Persian Sassanid exploitation, made them the owners of their lands that they could never possess, could never even dream of possessing those lands back in the old days of the old empires. And now under Islamic empire, they could own their land and much more they could get out of the Islamic rule. So that is why it was easy not only for Caliph Omar, but also for Uthman, and in the future, very easy for them to conquer all these, territories, because the people knew what they were getting in the Islamic empire: peace, prosperity, and that is just one big reason these people did not fight for their Greek rulers and for their Persian rulers, and made it easy for the Muslim forces to come and conquer them without a fight in some cases even. Okay, let's see what else we have. Well, here, as I said, and you had seen this scene before, that the Persians would attack the Greeks. The Greeks would have counterattack, and this thing was going for more than 1,000 years by the rise of Islam. And then Islam from the south would come and take care of both and free these people from the clutches of the Byzantine and the Persian empires. So freedom, peace, and prosperity that these people got under Islam, that alone can explain the spread of Islamic rule so fast and so wide. Let's see what else. Here also, in the days of Caliph Uthman, what had happened was, back in the days of Caliph Umar, who had, conquered a lot of territories, and now he was assassinated, and so, as I said, these Greeks and Persians became very emboldened to get back their lands and attack even the Arab lands. So here come the Persians against the Arabs. However, the Persians could not get out of even Iraq to come and attack the Arabs, but they had the intention to do if they could. Similarly, the Greek Byzantines out of Constantinople and Egypt would love to attack the Muslim lands if they could. They did, but then both of them lost. When the Muslims went after them, they lost more territories. So here what you have is, under the rule of Caliph Omar, if they lost one country, Syria, the Byzantine, for example, or Iraq in case of the Persians, in the days and in the rule of Caliph Uthman, when they attacked again, the Caliph Uthman went after them, and the Byzantine lost not only Egypt, but also Syria completely and parts of the eastern part of the modern day territory of Turkey. Similarly, the Persians lost not only complete Iraq, but also they lost most of their Persia. And so after the rule of Caliph, the third Caliph, Uthman, these power would never be able to attack again any Muslim ruler in the region. That does not mean they would not be fighting. They would be fighting, but anytime they fought back, they lost more. And so what would happen eventually down the road when we finish this course in Islamic civilization, Muslim would gain more and more territory. And this is a strange way. They defended their territory, but they ended up getting more territory and by defeating the attackers. Let's see what else we have. Caliph Uthman, his defense of Islamic empire, and this is nothing new, it would continue, with other empires also. His defense of Islamic empire, in fact, further expanded Islamic conquest and brought more territories under the Islamic rule. Muslim forces reached east and west, from Persia to Afghanistan and western China, from Egypt to Morocco and southern Spain. That is a lot of territory. Think about it, from Spain in the west to China in the east. Okay. Muslim even settled in Sicily and Cyprus, that is eastern Mediterranean and south of the Italian peninsula, Sicily, and they would stay there for quite some time, although they would be, removed out of Sicily later on in the history of the Italian peninsula. All this necessitated one economic and legal system to control this huge big empire and a lot of lands and different people. So the Caliph had to come with one economic and legal system. So it was very easy for Uthman. So for the, let's see here, this is again, the same old scene that I've been showing you for the past 2-3 sessions. This is the green spot, Mecca and Medina and Taif at the most, and Jeddah maybe also. In 632, by the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, that is what the Islamic territory, so to speak, was. Then by the end of the first Caliph, all Arabia, including Yemen and other, present-day Oman and Palestine and parts of Iraq and Syria, came under the Islamic rule by the death of the first Caliph. By the death of the second Caliph, Caliph Umar, in 644, Muslim moved into, even in Persia, and complete Egypt came under their control. Similarly, most of the area between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea also came under their control, and Turkey was next. By the death of the next Caliph, Uthman, the third Caliph in 656, you see most of North Africa, southern parts of Spain, Sicily, Cyprus, and even Crete Island, they came under the control of Islamic rule, even as far east as modern-day Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan. So here also, think for yourself. Maybe you could do your own research and find out how was that possible. Such a spectacular spread of Islamic rule, so fast and so wide. And as I said, it was the Islamic faith that convinced both the Muslims, the Arabs, from out of Mecca and Medina, and those other people on the other side of the battlefield, that at the end of the day, they would be better off if they converted to Islam, if they accepted Islam. Now, here I should say something, how it worked. If the Muslims came under attack, they would not attack right away. They would go to their leaders and give them quite a few choices. Number one, if you convert, and this would be sometime right in the middle of the battlefield, if you convert You are Muslims and we will not fight you. Number two, let's not fight, but accept Islamic rule in your areas, and which meant that you have to pay us some taxation, and especially what is called jizya, and that would be a sort of a guarantee of your good conduct, that you would not bother us, you would not create trouble in the region, and if you don't take those two peaceful options, then the third option is already there in the battlefield, which is to fight. So, accept Islam, accept jizya, taxation, or fight as we are just about to do it. So, that is how the way it worked. And so, again and again you see these things and seem sometime unbelievable that the Muslims would do something like this to their rivals, to their the people who are just about to attack them, and they would do this. And the reason was simple: they were not going to conquer lands, but to spread Islam in the lands and in the people surrounding Mecca and Medina, and then Saudi Arabia, modern day Saudi Arabia, and other parts of the Islamic empire. So keep those three options in mind. Some people would pick them, choose the first option, the second option, and some would, of course, they were powerful empire, would go for the third option, which was let's fight, and they will. And they did and lost. Okay, let's see what else we have. Caliph Uthman invited even regional leaders to embrace Islam. He sent them letters. And so, Islamic empire, right here, Caliph Uthman sent his envoy, his ambassador to, Ambassador Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas to Chinese Tang Emperor Gaozhong in 651 AD. Very powerful person. Remember, he is the emperor of the Tang dynasty. It's a very powerful dynasty in China, and Caliph Uthman sent him his ambassador Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas and asked him to accept Islam. And that was, sort of a nice way to, deliver him that letter. But it's just amazing, how this Chinese Tang Emperor Gaozhong would have received that message. He received it nicely, though. And then also, just to give you a sort of a sense between the comparison between the two empires, on the left, the green, you have the Islamic empire, the Islamic Caliphate, and on the right you have Tang China, and it was also spreading, and it was spread mostly, west and east and south and north, that would become, modern day China, but still it was expanding, and these were the two expanding powers in the region, and they will collide later on. Here, the Chinese emperor even ordered the construction of a mosque in Huaixing area, and that is just amazing. And so here you are looking sort of a brand new mosque, but this was built, the foundation was laid in 650s by the order of the Chinese emperor. That is how the Muslim sources tell us, and that old ancient mosque or masjid is still there in Guangzhou province in China. Later on, in China, you would have another, what is called the Great Mosque of Xi'an in China, built in 742 AD. And this Xi'an, sometime it's also called by its modern name Chang'an. And so the Xi'an and Chang'an, those are the two names of the same place. And here you have, a mosque, a very ancient old mosque built in 742, and that mosque is still there, and people go and visit it. Here in that mosque, you have a plaque, Arabic plaque with, the Shahada is written in it, and it is in the Great Mosque of Xi'an, China, that was built in 742 AD, and it says, the plaque says in Arabic, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, meaning there is no God except Allah, and Muhammad is the prophet of, or the messenger of Allah. And so that's the declaration of Islam, and there you have it in China in the Mosque of Xi'an. Moving forward, with the Islamic Empire. Here, till this day, Chinese Muslim in Xi'an since 650s. You know, you have the Chinese Muslim community in Xi'an in that area, and it's a very thriving community. Here you have Chinese Muslims praying in Urumqi in the western part of China. This picture was taken in 1979. Chinese Muslims study the Quran. These are students of the Quran and Islamic studies in China. And some of them eventually, just like you see here in this picture, would become mullahs or the religious clerics in China, and then they would go to their respective villages and teach and preach Islam to their communities. Islam did survive under communism though, and you know, some religions could not, but Islam did, because it is mostly concentrated in the western part of China. So there is a huge big number of Chinese Muslim in the western part of China, and they have a relation with the Chinese in the east, their own countrymen, and also very good relations with the Muslims in the west, like in Central Asia, like Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and they go, you know, even further west to Persia, to Iran or modern day India, and even Saudi Arabia. In 2004, I was in Saudi Arabia for Hajj, for pilgrimage, and boy, I noticed so many Chinese Muslims there, and I talked to them. Some could speak even Urdu, which is the national language of Pakistan. Some spoke, you know, English also. And then one time I was in Pakistan and I met a group of Chinese students who were praying there in the airport. And I asked them after their prayer, you know, what they were doing in Pakistan. They said they came to attend madrasas and learn Islamic studies, the Quran and Hadith and Islamic law. And after graduating from, you know, the Pakistani madrasas, they were going back to China to educate their community in Islam. So the presence of Islam in China is very old. It happened in the days of Caliph Uthman that we are studying today and talking about. Let's see further. Now, the economic policies of Caliph Uthman, one thing that he did, and that was the best, and that was that he maintained the previous Caliph, Caliph Umar's prohibition on owning conquered land by the Arabs. Arabs really wanted, they, you know, in the early history of Islam, or especially after Caliph Umar and Uthman, some of the Muslim commanders, when they conquered lands in Syria, modern day Syria, Egypt, you know, Iraq and Persia and some other places, these were enormously beautiful lands, very rich, extremely rich. Look at the river Nile Delta, very rich. Similarly, if you go to Syria, I mean, a very rich land, you know, rivers and all that. Move further east to Iraq, the land of two rivers, Euphrates and Tigris, and that's why it's called Mesopotamia in ancient books. Mesopotamia is the old name of modern day Iraq, and it's called land between two rivers. Wonderful land. Similarly, further east in Iran, and then India in the Indus Valley. So naturally, in accordance with the traditions of the time, any army, whether Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Persian, any army that conquered a land, that land belonged to them, the people belonged to them, so they took the land and enslaved the people. But under Islam, they simply could not do that. And it was very clear from day one, in the days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then in the days of the Caliph Abu Bakr Siddiq, and then after him in Caliph Umar, and now Uthman told them, the Prophet never allowed this thing. We did not conquer these places for land, to own the lands. And so he kept that prohibition on the Arabs not to own the land, and he would not allow them. That does not mean that later on, when he was dead and gone, they could not do so, and so they did. They believe that, these land belongs to them. However, to the extent that the Spanish conquistadors 1,000 years later came the way they came and took over South America, Central America, that type of a land grab never happened under Islam by the Arabs. When the British and other Europeans came to North America, Canada and modern day United States, what did they do? Well, basically they butchered the Native Americans and took their lands, and that was nothing, anything against the ancient laws that people have been doing. So in ancient time, in medieval times, in modern times, non-Muslim forces have done just that. When they conquer the land, they seize the land, they own the land, and they even own the people and use them as slaves. Under Islam, that could never happen, and it did not happen. However, it is true, some people did take advantage of later on the policy of the caliphs, and they owned land, they owned slaves, no question about it, especially those slaves that they captured in the battlefield, prisoner of wars, and that's everywhere. The wars is the one machine that makes slaves. Free men become slaves when they are defeated on the battlefield. They could be sold, they could be used for labor, or but to the extent that the Greeks did, the Romans did, the Persians did, the Europeans did, that type of a slavery you never see in Islam. I did not say there was never slavery in Islam, on a very limited basis compared to everybody else, and a lot of slaves benefited because they gained freedom quickly under the Muslim rule than compared to the Greek rule or the Persian rule or the any other rule. So I thought that I should say this, the beneficial Islamic rule in the lands, and that was, again, I must tell you, was one of the major factors that Islam so quickly spread and so vastly spread among the population of the older empires. Okay, let's see what else. All right. So he maintained Caliph Umar's prohibition on owning land by the Arabs in the conquered countries. Zimmis, non-Muslim subjects, they kept the lands in their possession. That is the local people, the Persians, the Iraqis, the Egyptians, the Turks, the Greeks, those who were conquered by the Muslims, they came under the protection of Islam and Muslim rulers, and that's why they are called Zimmis. Zimmi means responsibility of protection. This was the responsibility of the Muslim ruler to protect the local people whose countries were conquered, and so the non-Muslim subject people, they kept their lands, and that's why you see so many, the vast majority of the people today, they are owner of their own lands. They don't have Arab landlords, and if there are, a few of them, that is quite natural. Okay? So the Zimmis, non-Muslim subjects, keep that in mind, they kept their lands in their possession. Because of that, now they could own land under Islamic rule, which they could not under the Greek and the Persian rule. They would work more to produce and sell more crops, more cattle, and produce more commodities. That was good for them because now they were the owner of the land. Capitalism works any time, right there. Okay? And it was good for the state because the state, the Islamic ruler, could tax them more and get more taxation and more revenues, which always goes, don't read my lips on this, I cannot promise you I would not tax you. Okay? So the state received a lot of taxes, a lot of revenues from the increased commodity of crops and commodities and other things. Let's see what else we have. Staying with the economic policies, he did allow, Caliph Uthman did allow Arabs to purchase lands from willing non-Muslim local sellers, but they could not force them. And, anytime a person has more money and he wants to, buy land, nobody could stop him. And so that's what happened to later on in Caliph Uthman, liberalizing economic policy, so to speak. I don't think they could do that under Caliph Umar. You know, the two were very different persons. Okay, so that also increased competition and production between the Arabs and the non-Arabs in the same country. It also led to landlordism among Arabs, and that was, you know, one fear of Caliph Umar and also of Uthman, and that's what happened. Arab became landlords, and in view of Umar, that was not a good thing. The Caliph was accused of helping his Umayyad clan relatives of having money, borrowing money, you know, and buying lands, and that would come and really harm him. Okay, the Caliph was accused of helping his Umayyad clan and relatives, and so that, of course, the natural result of that was that rival Abbasid clan opposed Uthman policies, economic policies. Here comes one thing, and that is, you know, in any religious group, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslims are not immune to this thing, that most of the time we are more economic beings than religious beings. We go more by our economic interests and political interests rather than the dictates or rather than the rules of the religion. And so in many cases, religion takes, you know, the second seat, and the economic agenda and the political agenda takes the first seat. And that's what you see here also between the Abbasid and the Umayyads, because the Umayyads in the days of Caliph Uthman, they were seen getting one land, you know, one place, one position, one, you know, this and that. And so the Abbasid, the rival clan, they could not take it, and this would lead them to, you know, bloodshed in the history, in the early history of Islam. It's coming soon. Okay, let's see what else. Staying with the economic policy of Caliph Uthman, he created new administrative divisions when he divided, you know, provinces into divisions, and then he combined some division to make provinces. He appointed new garrison governors, judges, and tax collectors. He posted trusted, honest, and loyal members of his own Umayyad clan. Here is one point that, you know, to be fair to Caliph Uthman, the Abbasid, you know, leaders at that time and later on, the Abbasid historians, they accused Uthman, Caliph Uthman, of nepotism. And that is, you know, a very tricky accusation. Why Caliph Uthman appointed members of his clan and also other talented people? The reason was very simple. He was, you know, already more than 70 years old when he came to this big position of caliph. And so he was very a person, very lenient person, so to speak. And he wanted to have really trusted people in those positions. And they could be only members of his family and his clan. If he had appointed people from the Abbasid, which he did, or other tribes or other clans, and if they did anything wrong, it would have been very difficult for him to remove them. And so he posted those people that he could remove them. And that is what he did. If somebody came to him and told him of his own clan member that I cannot run Egypt, he said, okay, stay with me in Medina, don't go there. And he would send somebody else there. And so that is how he would function. He did not want to raise the sword or the stick against anyone, because he remained, that was his nature. He remained very lenient. So not to punish errant or corrupt officers, what he did, he appointed very trusted people who would not be corrupt, who would not make mistakes or, you know, cheat or deceive, and pocket money. So the relationship between him and the officers remained very good. But by that token, people could see that he was only appointing his own people that he could trust, and that created problem for him among the Abbasid clan members, and you would see the result would not be good, very bad. Let's see further. So he posted trusted, honest, and loyal members of his own Umayyad clan, and of course rival Abbasid clan accused him of nepotism. Okay. Staying with his economic policy, he allowed Muslims to borrow money from Baitul Mal or the state treasury. Anyone could go and apply and get the money. He also dug wells and irrigation canals, not only just in Egypt, but also in Iraq, especially in Iraq and Syria. And that was a good policy. He expanded trade and commerce between Egypt and Persia. And you would see here, the globalization of the Middle East first in the history of globalization. He increased also jizya and other taxes. Jizya is the tax that non-Muslim paid. And so those people who could not pay, they were exempt anyway. Women and children and monks and religious, scholars, they were exempt from this jizya. You should know this, as we talked about it last time. He modified or rather Islamized Sassanid coins. So the Persian coins or the Greek Byzantine coins that were already there, he just modified them and used them in his caliphate. Later on, the Muslim would have their own spectacular coins, but in the beginning they use the coins of Sassanid. Just like you go anywhere, you can use dollar in Afghanistan, or somebody else. Right there, this is a coin of 640 AD, and King Yazdegerd III, the last ruler of the Sassanid Empire, that he ruled, and he was later on, kicked out of business by the Muslim forces, and one of his own, rivals, Persians, they killed him. So this was his coin, and on the edges you see it's nothing is written, just his image and some other images. Now, what you see is on the edge of that coin, the picture remains, which was un-Islamic, so to speak, for those times, but they added the Arabic Bismillah, which means in Arabic, in the name of Allah. So whatever you do, you say Bismillah, and you say in the name of Allah. And so that's what they did to. Here is another coin that was added a little bit more than Bismillah and maybe La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. I cannot read it that good, but still you see Bismillah clearly in the name of Allah on the coin. This coin is old, but by 690 it was Islamized, so to speak. It could be Persian, it could be Byzantine, I really cannot tell. You can do your own research on it, and how the coins, numismatics, the history of the coins can tell you a lot about the history of the rule, the political rule. And so, if a king went down or his dynasty went down, the next dynasty or the next king, they had their own coins. So the coins, they tell you a lot, who was in power and how much that power extended. So it depends on where you found the coin. And so it tells you, the dollar can tell you the power of United States of America. It's not just only, in Maine and Michigan, but also in Afghanistan, Iraq, and throughout the Middle East and throughout Europe. And that's what dollar is so mighty, that it is the universal currency. And especially it is used for one great thing that nobody can resist. Everybody, not really loves it, but everybody has to have it, and that is oil. So most of the oil in the world market, in international market, is bought and sold with dollar, and that is why dollar is very dominant in international currencies. Euro is rising, but it's also falling, because of the European policies, financial policies. So dollar is the #1 currency in the world, because everybody would accept it. It is backed by the might of United States, and so that's how dollar is so mighty in international market. Let's see what else. Caliph Uthman, he standardized the Quran. That was a great achievement on his part. Islamic needs of the empire. Several nations speaking different languages had converted to Islam. Non-Arab Muslims could not pronounce Quranic Arabic perfectly, and that is a problem till this day. Well, think about it. Whatever your language, in our case, I mean, in your case, English, if you convert to Islam, you can learn a lot about Islam, its practices, its beliefs, and everything. But reading the Quran in Arabic would need you a lot more to, know. And so that's why it was very difficult for non-Arab Muslims to pronounce Quranic Arabic perfectly, and you must do that because a slight difference of pronunciation in Quranic text makes a big blunder. And so yes becomes no and no becomes yes. That difference. So dark becomes light, light becomes dark, and so it is very important for Muslims, to pronounce the Arabic text of the Quran perfectly. And so that's why, Muslims, non-Arab Muslims, they spend so much time on it. And speaking of the non-Arab Muslims, as I told you, I believe in some previous sessions, that Arabs are only 20% or maybe less than 20% of the world Muslim population. It is 1.5 billions with a B, B as Bravo, okay? So the Muslim world population is 1.5 billion, and of that, more than 80% are non-Arab Muslims. As I told you, the largest Muslim population is in Indonesia. It is also, a non-Arab Muslim country. Similarly, in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, and even in China. Millions of Muslims are Chinese in the western part of China, as we talked about. So these Muslims have to learn the Quran in the right way. And unfortunately, some would have the luxury to have a perfect pronunciation, great teachers, masters, experts to teach them. And now the technology is helping people a lot. Because of the internet, you can listen to the best reciter, Arab native speaker, Muslim reciter of the Quran while you are sitting in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and China, and Bangladesh, wherever you are, or here in this country, in the United States or in Europe, you can listen to the perfect pronunciation of the Arab Muslim reciter of the Quran, the expert in the Quran, and that is, great that technology makes that type of a thing possible. And now Skype, you don't have to even pay for it. See the person live, listen to the person live, and I just don't know how these telephone companies, how much they hate them. I mean the Skype, So it's a perfect tool to help Islam spread around the world, especially among Muslim, and then, of course, non-Muslim, convert to Islam also. Let's see the miracles of the technology. Let's see what else we have. Islamic needs of the empire. So Caliph Uthman, he convened the committee of expert compilers of the Quranic text. This committee existed back in the days of the Prophet, and the first Caliph used them to compile the Quran. So these were the expert compilers of the Quranic text. So he reconvened that committee and asked them to standardize the pronunciation of the text, the Quranic text, and that is exactly what they did. By adding vowels and some, not all, some diacritical marks. And these diacritical marks would be added later on, and whatever way it can help people to pronounce, the non-Arabs to pronounce the Quran perfectly, they would help them. And so here you see the adding of the vowels, which the Arabs never needed, the diacritical remarks which the Arabs never needed because it was their language. And so for non-Arabic speaking Muslims, those were needed and it helped a lot. So the standardization of the Quran, Quranic pronunciation was done in the days of Caliph Uthman. They also made several copies of the standardized Quran and they gave it to governors, sent it to governors of non-Arabic speaking Muslims like in Persia, like in Egypt and other places, North Africa and some other places like as far as Afghanistan and Central Asia. And so he even sent experts to teach the Quranic recitation to non-Arab Muslims in the Islamic Empire. And so that was a great service on his part that he rendered to the standardization of the Quran, and this is believed to be the oldest Quran. And one of the copies that the committee of experts produced in the days of Caliph Uthman. However, I must tell you, this claim is contested, and so there has to be further research on this copy to find out if that exactly is the Quran that was produced in the days of Uthman, Caliph Uthman. So this is very important. When you make a claim, you have to really do your research and test. So the claim is there. It is in the Central Asian country, and they're in Tajikistan, and so this has to be checked out. And because there is no real test, carbon test especially, on the paper, nobody has done it. So that's why I cannot really 100% say that this is exactly, it may well be, but I won't say this is exactly the same copy that was produced by the committee of experts. But they did produce several copies, and they sent it east, west, north and south, because people needed it, and they would send it to the governors, and then they would make their own copies. Caliph Uthman also did one thing, and that was that he collected other copies that existed and he burned them so that there would be only one copy of the Quran. Did he collect all the copies, 100%, every piece and bit of the Quran that existed before the standardized Quran? Nobody can say that for sure. So if somewhere 100 years later, 1,000 years later, somebody comes up, hey, look at this piece. I found it in this cave or that cave, this place or that place. Yes, that piece would be piece of the Quran. But that piece is already there in the Quran. There is nothing that can be added to the Quran or deleted from the Quran. That is how for 1400 years the Quran has remained exactly the same thing as the Prophet Muhammad received it and we recite it today. So after all these 1400 years, there has never been a single problem with the text, with a single word of the Quranic text. And I'm not saying that somebody cannot come down the road 1,000 years later and say, I found this piece. Yes, you found this piece, but that piece already is there in the Quran, and maybe Caliph Uthman failed to collect it, or people did not give it to him, and so it survived. That is possible, but it would be again piece of the Quran that exists inside the text of the Quran. Let's see what else. So now, opposition to Uthman's rule. Tribal and clannish tendencies remained very high during Caliph Uthman's rule. Some ruling families in faraway provinces like Egypt and Iran opposed Uthman's restrictive policies because he told Arabs, you cannot own land, possess land that belonged to the local people. That infuriated a lot of people. Okay? They accused him of nepotism. There is no question about it that he did appoint people from his own clan because they were the most trusted people who would not go corrupt. But the accusation is there, he was accused of nepotism. People at that time did not understand his logic, and so they rose against him. not everybody, but especially the opposite clan, particularly the Abbasid. Hundreds of people belonging to different anti-Uthman groups. They, mostly from Egypt, the historian tells us, they came to Medina and surrounded his house. So he was besieged in his house for quite some time, for weeks. And on July 17, 656, they killed him in his house. Some of the killers were killed by Uthman followers and clan members. So he was protected. There were guards at his door. So historians tell us that these killers, they went from another side of the house. So they climbed the wall of his house and entered his room and killed him. And before the guards could come, and protect him, they had already killed the caliph. And so that is how then started another fight between the killers and the guards eventually killed, those killers. But then, it also was an early birthday chaotic situation, like who supported Uthman and who opposed Uthman, and that, remained a big problem till this day. Some people, really believe, especially among our Shia brothers, Muslims, believe that, yes, he appointed his clan members and he sort of abused his power. But the vast majority of Muslims, 80% of Muslims, the Sunnis, do not believe in that story. Okay, let's see further. I think you're coming to the end. Reaction report of session 17. Write brief notes on the institutional achievements of Caliph Uthman and the causes of the Caliph murder. Why did they murder him? So, in review, let's see. We did a lot. We talked about Caliph Uthman, who protected conquered areas in Syria, Egypt, and Iraq, prevented Arabs from possessing lands, and it was one of the reasons people did not like him. Liberalized financial policies, people could borrow money, standardized the Quran, and for some of his policies he was murdered by rival clannish powers. Stay engaged, be good. If you have any question, any comments, just let me know in Laulima. And so there are assignments that you need to check, and if you have any question, please send me a message. Thank you very much, and I see you with session 18. Next time we will talk about Caliph Ali, the fourth Caliph of Islam. Thank you so much.
بسم الله